3-2-3-3.
385.
385. 2 rounds on you, Chief.
2 rounds on me.
More than 100 U.S. Marines launched an air assault in the southern Syrian desert backed by artillery fire to send a strong message to Russia not to send their forces inside a restricted area near an American military outpost, 2 U.S. defense officials have told Fox News. The show of forces comes as the leaders of Iran, Russia and Turkey are meeting Friday in Tehran to hammer out their next steps in the 7-year Syrian civil war ahead of an expected offensive led by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces into the country's northwest Idlib province. On 2 separate occasions this month, September 1 and September 6, the Russian military warned its American counterparts of its intention to conduct a military operation in southern Syria near the At-Tanf garrison where U.S. Special Operations Forces are located. Twice the U.S. military has told the Russians to back off. The United States does not seek to fight the Russians, the government of Syria or any groups that may be providing support to Syria in the Syrian civil war, Navy Captain William Urban, a spokesman for U.S. Central Command, said in a statement. The U.S. does not require any assistance in our efforts to destroy ISIS. In Tehran, the trilateral summit between Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was meant to finalize military plans for the total annihilation of terrorists in Syria, Putin said. The area is home to 3 million people, including hundreds of thousands of civilians living among rebel fighters including thousands with ties to al-Qaeda. The Trump administration has warned Syria, Russia and Iran not to kickstart the offensive over fear of civilians. Earlier this week, President Trump tweeted, "President Bashar al-Assad of Syria must not recklessly attack Idlib province. The Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake to take part in this potential human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of people could be killed. Don't let that happen." The warning appeared to have been ignored after Russian jets began bombarding Idlib. "We consider any assault on Idlib to be a dangerous escalation of the conflict in Syria," said U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley Friday in New York. Airstrikes by Russia and the regime. The atrocities committed by Assad will be a permanent stain on history and a black mark for this council which was blocked over and over by Russia from taking action to help, she added. In a statement describing the air assault that took place Friday night in Syria, a spokesman for the U.S. military's Central Command, responsible for all American forces in the Middle East, said it was an effort to demonstrate the capability to deploy rapidly, assault a target with integrated air and ground forces, and conduct a rapid exfiltration anywhere in the Operation Inherent Resolve combined joint op. Exercises like this bolster our defeat ISIS capabilities and ensure we are ready to respond to any threat to our forces, said Navy Captain Bill Urban. A threat some took as going beyond ISIS but to Moscow. The rare show of force in Syria comes months after U.S. aircraft, including AC-130 gunships, jets and bombers killed roughly 300 Russian mercenaries near Deir al-Zor in eastern Syria after American Special Operations Forces came under attack. The Russians agreed to a 34-mile deconfliction zone around the At-Tanf garrison to avoid accidental conflict between our forces, and to remain professionally engaged through deconfliction channels. "We expect the Russians to abide by this agreement," Urban said. The Russian government has long called for the 2,000 U.S. military troops to leave Syria. The Russian provocations were not limited to Syria. Friday, the North American Aerospace Defense Command said a pair of fifth-generation U.S. F-22 stealth jet fighters from Alaska intercepted a pair of long-range nuclear-capable Tu-95 Bear bombers last Saturday flying south of the Aleutian Islands. It was the first known flight of Russian bombers near the United States since May. The Ukrainian army on Friday claimed that soldiers came under artillery fire from the Russian side of the border overnight and were attacked by rebels in several other places in the rest of East. Ukrainian forces are trying to close in on the rebels, cutting them off from the border with Russia, which Kiev believes is the source of arms and reinforcement. Moscow has vehemently denied a role in the conflict between pro-Russian separatists and government troops, which has left more than 400 people dead and displaced tens of thousands. In a statement on Friday, the headquarters of the government's military operation in the east listed at least 7 locations where rebels attacked Ukrainian troops. They also claimed that attacks on 2 locations, including a border crossing, were supported by artillery fire from Russia. The Obama administration on Thursday accused Russia of firing artillery from its territory into Ukraine to hit Ukrainian military sites and asserted that Moscow is boosting its supply of weaponry to pro-Russian separatists. "We have new evidence that the Russians intend to deliver heavier and more powerful multiple rocket launchers to separatist forces in Ukraine and have evidence that Russia is firing artillery from within Russia to attack Ukrainian military positions," State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf told reporters. She said the evidence derived from human intelligence information, but declined to elaborate, saying it would compromise sources and methods of intelligence collection. The allegations come amid an increasingly bitter war of words between Washington and Moscow over the crisis in Ukraine and conflicting claims over the downing of a Malaysian passenger jet over eastern Ukraine last week. The U.S. has repeatedly accused Russia of stoking the Ukraine rebellion and has said it believes separatists shot down the Malaysian plane, killing nearly 300 people, with a Russian-provided surface-to-air missile. Harf said Wednesday the ultimate responsibility for the downing of the plane rests with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. Late on Thursday, Ukrainian troops entered the town of Lysychansk, which has been in rebel hands for several months, the military press office said. Rebels on Friday morning admitted in comments carried by Interfax that they had to flee the town, which is 70 kilometers, 45 miles, northwest of the regional capital Luhansk. International observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe on Friday were traveling to inspect the wreckage of the downed Malaysia Airlines plane and to search for more bodies. Human remains are still being found at the crash site more than a week after the plane went down. All 298 people aboard Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, most of them Dutch citizens, were killed when the plane was shot down on July 17. U.S. officials say the Boeing 777 was probably downed by a missile fired by pro-Russian rebels, likely by accident. Officials with Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, which oversees the joint fight against ISIS, said the departure of the roughly 400 troops from 1st Battalion, 10th Marines was an indicator of the success they and coalition forces have seen on the battlefield. With the city liberated and ISIS on the run, the unit has been ordered home, officials said in an announcement Thursday morning. Its replacements have been called off. Raqqa, in northern Syria, is the self-identified capital city for ISIS. As of this summer, it was the only Syrian city and population hub that remained under the control of the military group. A concentrated siege on Raqqa by U.S.-backed forces began June 6. Raqqa was publicly declared liberated October 20. According to task force officials, some 2,500 ISIS fighters were believed to be inside Raqqa when the fight began. For the entirety of that fight, Marine artillery units armed with M777 howitzers have been on the ground providing supporting fire. A detachment from the deployed 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit arrived on the ground in early 2017, and was replaced by 1st Battalion, 10th Marines, in mid-September, with a 155mm artillery battery in the fight. Their mission was to deny and disrupt ISIS from gaining ground or moving from their defensive positions. Lieutenant Colonel John O'Gorman, Chief of Fires for Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve, said in a statement. These Marines rained relentless and highly accurate firepower on the enemy. The current detachment of Marines has earned special accolades for its grit and effectiveness. Earlier this month, the commanding general of 2nd Marine Division, Major General John Love, said the 1/10 Battery had killed more ISIS than anyone with strategic fires and coordination with air assets. Army Sergeant Major John Troxell, senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told reporters the unit had fired so many artillery rounds in the fight that it had burned out 2 howitzer barrels. The announcement that Marine artillery will now be pulled out of the region and not be replaced is somewhat unexpected. Love told Military.com this month that 1/10 was set to be part of a long-term rotation that would maintain artillery presence in the ISIS fight. The departure of these outstanding Marines is a sign of real progress in the region, CJTF OIRA Director of Operations, Brigadier General Jonathan Braga, said in a statement. We're drawing down combat forces where it makes sense, but still continuing our efforts to help Syrian and Iraqi partners maintain security. Braga added that forces remaining in country would continue to work with local partner forces to prevent a resurgence of ISIS militants, defeat remaining pockets of ISIS presence, and enable international governments and non-government organizations to come in and help civilians recover. Under a canopy of trees on the edge of a large field, soldiers from Bravo Battery are lying in a circle as they pore over targeting charts. Nearby, others are preparing the howitzer cannons as helicopters swoop overhead. At the edge of the circle, the platoon leader watches as the field artillerymen go through their training exercise. No one seems to notice the small knot of hair at the base of the lieutenant's helmet, or that First Lieutenant Kelly Requa is the only woman on the field at Campbell's Crossroads on the sprawling grounds of Fort Bragg. By January 2016, the U.S. military must open all combat jobs to women or explain why any must remain closed. The Army in November officially began assigning female officers to lead the cannon platoons and plans to open other jobs, including those of crew members within the field artillery units. The integration comes as the military struggles with an increase in reports of sexual harassment and assault and as Congress battles with the Pentagon over how those cases are prosecuted. Some of those concerns were reflected in how senior commanders are preparing the men as women arrive, and what the men say concerns them, from whether women can keep up to whether the men's salty language will be too offensive. At the base near Fayetteville, Requa is one of at least 8 female lieutenants who were brought into the 3rd Battalion of the 320